This Headless Professor video is about the 21st century grading plan. It's complicated, but it's the best way to get an A in my classes. This multiple options grading is similar to going to lunch at a buffet. You don't have to eat everything to get full. We can just focus on the things that you like best and ignore the other possible components. In multiple options grading, we don't count all the work that is assigned. We don't count the things that you don't do. We don't count the assignments that are handed in late. And we don't count those assignments that you do poorly on. So there's no need for you to ask for extra credit. A great advantage of multiple options grading is that you can emphasize the components on which you do well and de-emphasize or don't count the components on which you do poorly. You can even avoid doing certain components. Now, honors students are going to have to do the projects. That's part of the honors contract. Now, one disadvantage of multiple options grading is that you have to keep track of your points. Don't ask the instructor, "How am I doing?" You will have to finish the rough draft of any projects on Google Docs by the due date. The basic idea of multiple options grading is that when you get 900 points according to the formula on the syllabus, you have earned your A. 800 for a B, 700 for a C, and 600 just to pass the course. Now, if you're under 600 points, you have failed the course. You can give a maximum contribution of any of your components. For example, the final exam can be counted for up to half of your grade. The same thing for a term project. If your class has assigned essays, each of them can count up to 10% of your semester grade. The same for the preliminary exam, the midterm exam if your class has one, the 10 best quizzes, and the 10 best discussion posts can also count up for 10%. And if you are permitted more than 10 discussion posts, each additional 10 discussion posts could count for 10% of your grade, up to 50% in some classes. The corrections you do of other students' work can also count up to 10% of your semester grade in certain classes. Let's take some examples. Susie scored 86 on her final exam, and she got 92 on her project. Those are her two best components, so we're going to count each of those for half of her grade. She gets a total of 890 points, a B for the semester. Notice that Susie doesn't have to count any essays. She doesn't count the ones she missed. She doesn't count the ones that she did poorly on. She doesn't have to count any quizzes, the preliminary exam, the midterm exam, any of her discussion posts, or any corrections of other students' work. Let's take another example of Sam. Sam got an 86 on the final exam. He also did well on 3 essays. His 10 best quizzes got him 82 points, and he took the midterm. You add up each of these, he's got 840 points for a B. Notice that Sam doesn't count the project that he didn't get in on time. He doesn't count the 2 essays that he forgot to hand in. He doesn't count the preliminary exam that he did poorly on. He doesn't even have to count any discussion posts or corrections. Here's another example of Sydney. Sydney did exceptionally well on her final project. And so we're going to count that for the maximum amount of half of her grade. She did well on 30 of her posts. So we'll count the best 10 for 90, the next best 10 for 90, and the next best 10 for 85. She did fantastic on her 10 best quizzes, so that will be counted for 98 points. She got 86 on her preliminary exam. We'll count that also. That gives her a total of 909 points for an A. Notice that Sydney didn't even have to take the final exam or write any essays. We don't have to count her midterm exam, which wasn't that good, or the rest of her discussion posts, which were not that good, or any of the corrections she did. Here's another example. This is Shirley. Now, Shirley did very poorly on her final exam. She only got a 58. Well, in most classes, that would be an F right there. But this is multiple options grading, and Shirley can reduce the impact of that final exam by counting other things instead. So we're only going to count her final exam for 30% of her semester grade. She did better than that on her 5 essays. So each of those 5 essays will be counted before we start counting any part of her final exam. She also did very well on her 10 best quizzes and did pretty good on her midterm as well. You add up those components, she gets 764, so she passes with a C, even though she did horribly on her final exam. She doesn't even have to count her project, the preliminary exam, any discussion post, or any corrections of other students' work. Now, some students may get confused or intentionally try to get a higher grade than they deserve. Let's go back to the case of Sam. Sam might write me and say, wait a minute, I also want you to count the essay number 3. I got a 60 there, but you know what? That'll give me an extra 60 points, and that'll get me a total of 900 for an A. Well, sorry, Sam, you can't do it that way. That would mean that he's going to try to count too many things for a total possible of 1,100 points. And the syllabus says you can only count those assignments for a total possible of 1,000 points. So if we were to calculate it Sam's way, that would be 900 points earned, but out of a total attempted of 1,100, which is closer to 82% just to be. Now, according to multiple options grading, if Sam wanted to count that third essay for 60 points, we'd have to count something else less, like instead of counting his final exam for 40% of his grade, maybe we'd only count it for 30%, or instead of counting it for 50%, we'd only count it for 40%. And that would reduce his point total down to 814. Here's another example that I see suggested by some desperate students. Simon wrote me and said, look, I got an 86 on my final, I got a 92 in my midterm, my 10 best quizzes were 94. Hey, if you average those 3 together, that gets 90. Well, sorry, Simon, it doesn't work that way. That would mean that he's counting some things too much. The midterm exam can only count for 10% of the grade, not a third. The 10 best quizzes can only count for 10% of the grade, not a third. So we can count the final for up to half of his grade. So let's take 86 times 5, and he gets 430 points. The midterm and 10 best quizzes, we'll just add to that total for 616. But that's only a D. Simon's problem is he just didn't do enough other writing assignments. If you're going to do a project, get it approved early in the semester, stay ahead of the deadlines, and write that project on Google Documents. Finish by the rough draft deadline, and revise by the end of the semester. If you don't complete a project, then you need to have enough essays or posts to give you the grade that you want. Students who fail under multiple options just didn't do enough good writing or just didn't do it that well.